Hey again. Today what I'd like to do is take you through a simple jazz blues, or a standard, I should say standard jazz blues. Many of us know how to play blues. We learned how to playing the blues, and we know a simple 1-4-5 and maybe even some not so simple 1-4-5s. And it's really not that much of a leap to go to a jazz blues, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. So let's go over basic jazz blues, coming right up. Alright gang, first things first, you'll want to download the chord diagrams and the chord progressions from the link in the description below. Now we are going to play a jazz blues in G, but the way that, and by the way, in the opening I was playing a blues in F, so we're going to play in a very guitar friendly key of G, and the way that we're going to do it is to start out with sort of a standard progression in regular blues called the quick change blues, and then we're going to morph it into a jazz blues progression. Now it's not the only jazz blues progression, but it's a good one to start. Okay, so a regular blues progression might be as follows. We all know it's a 1-4-5. In this case in G it'll be a G7, a C7, and a D7 played as follows. We'll start out in G7, then a bar of C7, back to G7 for 2 more bars, C7 for 2 bars, G7 for 2 more bars, 2 bars of D7, bar of G7, turn around to D7, and we're back at the top. All right, so now as we morph this into the jazz version, we're going to find that in jazz it's much more about movement, and it's a little busier, so we won't really stay on the same chord for more than, say, a measure, as we did in the blues version, but that backbone of the 1-4-5 is still going to be there. Okay, so here's the jazz version of this, or here's a jazz version of this, and notice I'm going to play, instead of the jazz version of the 7th chords, which would be like this. I do have it in the chord diagrams from the description. We're just going to play the regular sort of rock version of our G7 and so forth. I'll also want to occasionally substitute in, instead of playing a C7, we'll play another dominant chord, usually a 9th, which will sound very, very similar. Okay? So we're not going to change too much in terms of the chords. We're going to keep it straight. Alright, so here's the jazz blues version of it. It starts out with a measure of G, then it goes to a measure of G7, measure of C7, back to a measure of G7. Now so far it's all been the same, but now what we're going to do is we're going to change that by going to 2 different chords, and what I would like to do is give you the flavor for the whole thing first, and then we'll break it down afterward to tell you what's going on, what the thinking is maybe behind some of these chords. So instead of playing the 2nd measure of G7, we're going to play D minor 7, a half measure of that, and a half measure of G7, now our C7. Okay, so it's going to sound like this. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll play 1 measure of C7, now a C sharp diminished. Okay, so that's going to sound like this. So we'll play our okay. Now we're right back to our G7. Now here's where we would play 2 bars of G7, 2 bars of D7, and then the turnaround, okay? So instead of the 2 bars of G7, we will play a bar of G7 and a bar of E7. Again, we'll explain the movement there and why we're going there. Then instead of the 2 bars of D7, we will play A minor 7, and now a D7. And instead of our normal turnaround, which is a bar of G7 and a bar of D7, we will play the following. G7, half bar, E7, A minor 7th, and D7. And now we're ready to go back. Okay, here's the whole thing, and then we'll explain some of those. So here's the whole thing. All right, so let's talk about those changes where it's a little bit different. The first one that we see is the second bar of the G7 is replaced by a D minor 7th to a G7th before you go to that 7th chord, that C7th chord. So what's going on there, and what am I thinking? Well, in any case, a standard jazz maneuver, one of probably the most standard jazz maneuver or jazz chord progression is the 2-5-1, and very often you'll hear a 2 and a 5 chord as movement toward a chord that you're going to. So in this case we're headed to the C7th, right? Which is a type of C chord, and that's all you need to know about that. So what we're going to do in this case is play the 2 chord of that C7th, or a 2 chord of a C, and a 5 chord of a C. Now if we go to C and we play a major scale starting from C, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're back to the top. So we have to identify the 2 and the 5. Now it's always the 2 and the 5, so no worries there. So the 2 happens to be a D. That makes sense, right? It's just 1 up from C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5 happens to be a G. So we're going to play a 2, which is a D chord, and a 5, which is a G chord. But the flavors that we usually play, almost always, are the 2 will be a minor, and in this case we're going to play a minor 7, and the 5 will be a dominant. So that's what happens right there before that C7 chord. Instead of just playing the G chord and going to that C, which we could do and it would sound fine, we play the D7, D minor 7th, I'm sorry, and the G7 to get to that C7. So it's the 2-5-1. 2, 5, 1. Okay? Now, how do we get from the C back to the G? Well, one way that we do that, if we play a C7th, and I've been playing these C7ths right here, but if we play this one right here with the root on the third fret, 5th string, and sort of the A, if you take an A7, right, in the open position, and sort of like use your first hand as a capo and slide that up to the third fret, you get that C7. We're going to play a diminished chord. One way to formulate that diminished chord, or to think about it, is just changing that bass note, moving that up by 1. So you go from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret. So it's a real tense chord, it's a chord of movement, and it's going to that G. Okay. All right, so that's how you get that. It's just a chord of movement. A diminished chord is very often an in-between chord that can be used as a movement chord in jazz. So that's another common way of doing it. Instead of playing a 2-5-1, you play a diminished chord. Works great. Okay, the last part is instead of playing 2 bars of G and 2 bars of D7, we play one big 2-5-1, okay? So, but instead of doing that, we think of the G7 as the chord that we're going to come back to for the turnaround, okay? So we're going to play the G7 does something, then 2 bars of D7, and then we're back to the G, right? So if we think of that as one big 2-5-1, what we can do is we can start with the we start by thinking about, well, what would be a 2-5 to get there? Well, it would be a A minor 7 to D7 to G7, right? Because if we think of the 2-5-1 in G, we go G to A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5 is a D. So A minor 7th and D 7th. Okay, so far that's good. But we can clock that back a little bit as well, and we could play, if we wanted to, a 2-5 leading to the A as well. So you can take these back further and further. So one way of thinking about that would be to play a 2-5 to the A. That would be a B minor 7th to an E 7th. And you can take this back as far as you want, right? So we could think about the 2-5 to the B 7th. We're not going to do that here, but you can recognize this sound pretty instantly. Oops, I'm sorry. You can carry that on as long as you want. Here we're just going to stop it partially along the way, and that's where we get that E7 chord. It's really just a chord that's going to lead us to that A minor 7th, okay? And so we could have played the B minor 7th before that and then played the E7, but we didn't. We just played the E7. Okay, so we're going G 7th to E 7th to A minor 7th to D 7 and finally our G. And you'll notice the turnaround is exactly that. But instead of playing a full bar of each of those chords, we play it in double time and we only play a half bar. And that's it. So it's a lot of fun playing those 2-5s, and you can play them as far as you want. And the key thing is just to get the timing right, so that you're playing a half measure or a measure of exactly what it is. But that's how those chords work. That's how that turnaround of works. Well, there you have it, a basic jazz blues in G. Hope you like this one and take it a lot further than I just did, and have a lot of fun with it. We'll see you on down the road.